Warning, this is not a short video. It's going to be the most comprehensive one-stop shop for all new Line 6 HX Stomp users. I'm going to cover initial hardware setup and editing a fully featured Sunday-ready preset that you can use right away. This won't be a TikTok rapid-paced quick tips video. This is going to be a very deep dive, and I recommend navigating around the various sections using the chapter markers in the description whenever you need a recap. Let's get started. I'm assuming you have a 2-button aux switch and a mini volume pedal as per the recommended setup from my last video, which I'll link in the cards and in the description. The goal is to have a fully featured HX Stomp all-in-one rig. To achieve this, we'll need more than just foot switch 1, 2 and 3 on the front. We'll be expanding that functionality to foot switch 4 and 5, unlocked by using a 2-button aux switch. When you boot up the HX Stomp, enter global settings by pressing these 2 buttons, the page left, page right buttons, simultaneously. Using the top encoder, scroll over to Preferences and page right until you see Expression, FS Tip, Expression, FS Ring. By default, the HX Stomp is looking at EXP1 for EXP FS Tip. Make sure that this setting is changed to FS4. Next, scroll over to the foot switches menu and under FS4 function, check that FS4 is set to Stomp 4. Page over, make sure that FS5 function is set to Stomp 5. Big reminder, these settings reset whenever you update the firmware on the HX Stomp, so moving forward, please bookmark the video I put in the cards above for reference in case you forget how to reset these options after a firmware update. Welcome to live cam mode, where I'm going to build a HX Stomp preset from scratch for the absolute beginner. I'm going to go through it step by step, and I'm going to go at a very slow pace because that's what beginners need in terms of getting used and acclimatized to a quote-unquote complicated modeler like the HX Stomp. So here's my slightly biased opinion in that the Line 6 ecosystem is probably the easiest of the modelers to get into. Everything's laid out for you in its full glory on the desktop editor. There's no hidden menus, there's no having to tumble through various sub-menus. So let's start right away. When you open up HX Stomp and when you plug in the USB cable to the HX Stomp and download HX Edit on your computer, when you load it up and you do all the necessary to update, to get it all up and running, you're going to be greeted with this screen. And this screen here is the editor view. On the left side, you can choose several things. You can choose the preset view, which is your selection of presets from 01A all the way to 42C. The second tab next to presets is IRs or impulse responses. And as you can see, I've really loaded this out with every possible slot because I'm a big tone junkie fan. All this is for beyond the basic users. So let's go right to the editing space right here. So the middle portion is where you want to be primarily living in. And as you can see, that this is slightly non-traditional in that the guitar signal pathway is reversed. Traditionally, on a pedal board, the signal goes from right to left, but in HX Stomp, you're going to be reading from left to right. Your input is going to be your main LR input that proceeds to 8 blocks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, followed by lastly the output block, which is your main LR out. So this symbol, the arrow symbol to the outside, says that this is the output, and the guitar symbol here tells you that this is going to be the input. And just by itself, that's all just the dry signal of the guitar. So you have 8 slots available to you. What are you going to use? Let's load out something very simple. We're going to build a preset that's based on just simply pushing bypass buttons. No snapshots, no changing of parameters, no automatically swapping from A to B states of effects. Just really on and off as you would with a traditional analog rig. When you click on amp and cab, you're going to get a whole list. Go to the AC30, the A34 normal. Now, when you click on an empty block and you click on an amp block, you're going to load up the amp and cab into the signal path. It's lit up so you know it's enabled, and now you can have some basic amp and cab processing. Now that's all well and good, but I prefer having a little bit of basic ambience so that when I hear and play the guitar through the ambient cap, I can hear how it interacts with like some delay and reverb. Sometimes the delay and reverb can overemphasize some frequencies or dampen some frequencies, and having some basic ambience helps me to make decisions on the amp side of the tone of the amp side, so that I don't have to correct it later on when I'm tweaking the ambience, the delay and reverb side. So let's load up some very basic ambience. I'm going to scroll over to the delay tab. Now the thing is, you're going to have to take some time to not just read the manual as to what the different delay and reverb models are, but also what the parameters do and the basic character of the delay reverb. If you have time, I strongly suggest you play through every single delay, every single reverb, just to get a glimpse of what it's like to use those effects. And you'll be familiar with whether you want a brighter delay or a darker delay, a brighter reverb or a darker reverb, a modulator reverb, which means that it's a chorus signal that's blended in. Those are all possible models in the HX Stomp. So you might have option paralysis, but it's a good kind of option paralysis. So don't worry about any of the settings here. We're going to change that up later. Click the block next to the delay and let's load up a simple glitz reverb. So click on the reverb tab, go to stereo. Remember, the delay and reverb should be in stereo because you want both your ears to have that stereo spread. The problem with having it mono, for example, if I were to go straight to mono and hit here, you can hear that the delay is kind of like focused in on the middle part of your headphones like this. But if I were to change this to stereo, you can feel that spread of the delay from left to right. But automatically, you can feel that the bottom end is a little bit more spongy and that the mids are a bit more tamed because of the delay and the reverb. Now, I'm just going to do one quick thing before we carry on. I'm going to click this clock button right here. If you were to go to the delay settings and go to the right side here, this clock will, and you click it, it changes the way that the delay time is calculated. So delay time can be in milliseconds. You key in the specific time that delay occurs after the original signal is hit. If you click the clock, however, this quarter sign here, that refers to quarter notes with regard to the tempo on the HX Stomp. So right now, the global clock on the HX Stomp is at 96 BPM. So if I play, that is now tuned to quarter notes set to 96 BPM. If I set this faster, for example, if I were to key in, let's say 120 BPM, you should hear the delays ping pong a bit more. Versus if I were to make it slower. So that's what this is. And I'm going to make it 75. I'm going to keep it at 96 BPM and that's it. So we're not going to worry about any of these parameters right now. I want to focus in on the amp and the cap first, because this is where the core tone of the guitar is going to be. Right now, you can see that the amp drive is quite high, the bass is high, cut to 0, treble and presence at 5.5 and channel volume at 6. So several things that to note right here. So there's so many different parameters to choose and to tweak. Here's what I intend to do. I want the guitar to be cleaner, so I'm going to bring down the drive first to, let's say, 3. Now, I have a pretty bright Telecaster right here, so having a higher bass value seems to work quite fine, but I'm going to bring that down to 4 because I don't want too much low-end build-up. So bring that down just a slight. Now, the cut control on an AC30, and this is experienced based on the real amp. A cut control basically acts like a low-pass filter. If your cut control is at 0, so there's no low passing, all frequencies are going through. But the further up you go, the darker the sound is going to be. So I'm just going to demonstrate this very, very quickly. Now, the volume dropped quite drastically because the drive control was turned down. And that's the thing about guitar amps. If you have the preamp gain set to a certain level, as you bring it down, the overall volume is going to drop. How can you compensate for this? Well, the drive goes down, volume goes down. Let's raise that volume up with the channel volume. Channel volume is the only parameter on any of the amp models that's the same. It's like a universal master control. So some amp models don't have master controls, and the way to bring up or down the volume of the patch is to use the channel volume to bring it up. So if I bring this all the way to 10, so that brought up the volume of the guitar of everything up. So not just, it didn't affect the tone, it didn't affect the drive, it was a pure volume boost. Now, in terms of reactivity, the master control of an amp is going to be how quick and responsive the tubes are going to be reacting to your picking. Having the master at 10 basically means that your tubes are running full tilt and it reacts instantly to your picking, to any of the effects that are upstream, like overdrives and so on and so forth. On an AC30, I don't like it to be too reactive, too responsive, so I do want to bring that down to, let's say, 8 or 9. And this is going to be different depending on your style and your particular set of music. So anyway, let's hear how that sounds like. So you can hear that the guitar tone is not as in your face as with the master at 10. So bringing down that master volume does change the reactivity of the amp to your picking dynamics. Now, I still want this to be slightly brighter, so I'm going to bring up that presence control to 6. And right now we have 3, 4, 5, 6. That's a pretty easy way to remember the amp settings. Drive at 3, bass at 4, treble at 5, presence at 6. At this beginner stage, don't worry about sag, hum, ripple, bias, and bias X. Those are advanced amp controls, and there are many videos out there, including Jimmy's from Hey Worship Leader, who explain what each of those controls does. Let's go over to the cab tab, which is right next to the amp tab. Now, in the 3.5 update, this is the visual representation of where the microphone is positioned relative to the speaker cone. And if you've played with an amp before, you know that mic placement is going to play a huge role into how the overall EQ of the sound is going to be. Your core amp tone has been crafted, but the nuances, like whether it's going to be more directly in your face, whether it is going to have that upper high end, whether it's going to have a pronounced mid-range or pronounced bass, that's all going to be based on, no pun intended, on where your microphone is and what your microphone is going to be. Currently, the stock setting of the 2x12 Bluebell is an SM57, which is a pretty bright microphone. In fact, it's the microphone that I'm using right now to record my voiceover. It's a very high SPL kind of microphone that can take in a lot of volume. So this is great for those heavy metal, super high volume kinds of tones. And it's all preferences. You can basically stop here if you love this tone, no problem. But I want to have some tweakability and to have a bit more of that pronounced mid-range at the lower mids especially. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to change the microphone selection. So if you click on the microphone, the mic option right here, and can drop down menu, there are a whole range of microphones you can use. I'm going to choose a ribbon microphone though, R121 ribbon. And this is a microphone that is legendary because of how delicate and intricate the sound is. The position control is going to let you know where relative to the speaker cone is it going to be placed. Is it going to be placed directly in front of the speaker cone, or is it going to be placed away from the speaker cone? If you have the position at the center of the cone, directly in front of the cone, you're basically going to have the most amount of energy that's captured from the speakers. And that is something that you can see with this microphone too. If I speak directly into the microphone, you can hear all of my bass frequencies, all of my mid-range. Like as soon as I move away from the microphone this way, you can feel that the energy of the vocal has just gone down significantly because right now this is not capturing any of that direct voice. So if I move it back here, it's more direct. I like the sound of the direct guitar and the most amount of energy. So I'm going to have this at the center position. The problem with having a microphone right at the cone and right at the grill of the speaker is that you're going to have something called the proximity effect, which is if I were to put my microphone right here, you can hear the bass a lot more prominently. That's because I'm right next to the mic capturing element over here. But if I move backwards, that bass doesn't build up so much. So same with guitar. You want to move that microphone back a little bit. And for me, I personally like to put it 5 inches, which is quite far away. But I do like the fact that when you pull back a microphone far enough, you're not just capturing the sound of the cab, which is what you want to do, but you're also capturing the air around the cab. So that's going to introduce a bit more airiness, a bit more liveliness to the tone because you're capturing it as a live room microphone as well. Now, don't worry about the angle. The angle of the microphone basically means whether it's going to be 0 degrees, meaning that it's straight on, or 45 degrees, which means that it's tilted this way. And for me, I don't really deal with angled microphones so much, so I just like to keep it straight ahead. Again, all this is mostly beyond beginner level, so just keep that at 0 degrees and have the mic directly at the cone. Low cut and high cut. You can leave these controls alone because these are the basic settings that is correct or quote unquote textbook for electric guitar. But what that basically means is if you have a full frequency spectrum from 20 to 20k kilohertz and it's flat, you're going to have all this, excuse me, you're going to have all this bass information, all this treble information in your sound if you don't use low cuts or high cuts. A low cut basically shapes off the bass frequencies from whichever frequency that you set it to. There's going to be an EQ slope from 90 Hz to roll off all the bottom end from 90 Hz and below. Same thing for the high cut. The high cut at 15 kHz means that from 15 kHz onwards, there's going to be a slope to roll off all the upper high end. So you're going to get a curve that looks a bit like this, like a trapezoid. I personally think that you can dial this up to 120 because you're playing in a big church mix, and you don't need all that lower end information if you're playing in a big church mix because that's just going to add to mud in your mix. And with high cut, some people like to push it down all the way to 9K because that's basically the natural resonance of the cab. Cabs don't have any information from 9K onwards anyway. Now, that's the conventional wisdom. I personally think that with the Line 6 ecosystem, there is some upper high-end content that if you shave off, you're going to get a very muffled sound. And you don't want to get the muffled sound. And I think that with the HX Stomp and the Helix ecosystem, I like to keep this around 12 kilohertz to 13 kilohertz. It's very high. You're going to get a lot. It might sound fizzy, but you're not killing the character of the guitar cab when you have this set to something drastic like 9 kilohertz. So keep this at 11 or 12. I'm going to keep it at 12. Let's dial in some overdrive, and that's where you're going to get your variation of clean to overdrive to lead. Now, this is where we're going to go to the distortion tab to bring in all the various options of overdrive. We're going to load up a Tima overdrive, and you can hear that it's going to be a bit more buzz. And we're going to hear with these stock settings how this changes the sound of the amp. Now that's pretty cool. So I'm going to do a few things to make this a bit less piercing to the ear. And what I'm going to do is I do like to bring this up. I'm going to do my favorite thing of turning down the bass cut to 3 and turning up the treble cut to 6. Now, this is only specific for the Tima overdrive. I can't tell if this control exists in other overdrives, but with cut controls, what basically that means is if you turn the control up, similar to how the cut control is on an amp in the AC30, the higher you go, the more the frequencies that it cuts. So a treble cut control means that the higher you turn it, the less treble it's going to have in the signal overall. Having a bass cut at 3 means I want more bass frequencies, and having a treble cut at 6 means I want less treble frequencies. I gotta flip this to the center because that's the personal preference as to how I like the Tima, which is the Timmy overdrive. I'm gonna turn this down to 6, and this is the sound. And that's pretty cool for like a drive sound. Well, I do want a bit more drive out of this, so I'm going to turn up the amp drive actually. Now, this is how I personally get a lead sound out of this. Instead of stacking 2 different distortions or overdrives, you're going to get a very noisy sound. So for example, if I were to just choose a that brought up the noise threshold by so much because that is a distortion into a distortion. And the problem with having dual distortions or dual overdrives is that you're going to get noise very quickly. So what I like to do is push the overall drive character with a boost pedal in front. In this list of overdrives in the distortion tab, you can see the one right on top is the Kinky Boost, which is modeled after the EP booster by Exotic Effects. Now, this pedal does not really drive the sound and introduce its own distortion character. It basically pushes things in front of it. So what I have right now is the EP booster boosting the Tima overdrive, and this sounds like this. Now, is that a decent sound that you can start off with to play and just learn stuff on? Absolutely. But why don't we try to go one step further and to use different effects to bring out the subtleties or even squeeze even more tone out of this signal chain. And squeeze we will, no pun intended, with a compressor. Now, I'm going to put in a deluxe compressor. There's several models that you can choose here, but I'm going to use the deluxe compressor because I want to show you some critical factors as to what the compression actually does to your signal. Without a compressor, let's turn it on. So what a compressor is actually doing is it's reducing your dynamic range. It's making your loud stuff softer and your soft stuff louder. And this is great for keeping the guitar in a specific dynamic range where you don't want your transients to really spike up and hit you in the face like we did with some of the transients in the overdrives right here. So theoretically, this should help us get a more even distortion sound because that's going to chop off the peaks and make it a bit more even. This is actually quite an aggressive sounding compressor. I'm going to turn this down to minus 33 dB threshold. I'm going to turn down the compression ratio to 3:1. Long story short, you can read this on your own time, but the higher the number, as in the higher the ratio, the more compressed your signal is going to be. 6:1 is a very high compression ratio. I personally like 3:1 for guitar because you don't want it to be too aggressive and too squashed. Now, attack and release, again, there are quite advanced controls, but basically this tells the compressor how fast you want it to act. If you want the compressor to work faster immediately, bring this control down. So I'm going to bring it out 20 milliseconds. And the release, this tells the compressor how long to hold the note for before it decays away. And right now at 200 milliseconds, that is a milder release setting. I actually like this to crank up to, I actually like something a bit more cranked, a bit more. You can actually crank this all the way to some crazy number right here, but I'm going to keep it at 250 milliseconds because I want it to be natural sounding. So that's a bit more natural sounding, isn't it? Now, this is at 100% mix, which means that you're only hearing the compression signal. I like to bring this down to maybe 65% because I want some of my natural guitar transients to blend into the original compressed signal. So it's not going to be all squashed, it's going to be blended. So you can hear I go back some of my transients. Now with this compressor, let's hear how the overdrives react. So this is the clean. This is the overdrive on. Automatically, you can tell that the transients didn't poke out as much as without the compressor on, and which made it a bit more even, a bit more saturated. That's what I really wanted to get. Now, if you turn this on, the King Booster, you're going to get this very saturated sound. So now we have 3 flavors of gain. You got clean, you got crunch, and then you've got lead. Quick aside, are you finding value in this video? If you are, hit the like button as it lets me know that content like this is relevant for you, encourages me to make more like this, and YouTube sends it out to more people. If you're a worship musician on the same journey, consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon. Thank you so much. With worship guitar, you want the ubiquitous dotted 8 sound, and you got 2 more blocks left, one before the amplifier and one at the end of the chain. Now, I want to do 2 things. I want to get a dotted 8 sound, and I want to get a shimmer reverb sound. And the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to just add in blocks to help with that. I'm going to choose a simple delay, click on mono, simple delay, just add it in first. Now click on the clock to turn this into subdivisions. Now I'm going to bring this to dotted 8. Now with delay, feedback, and mix, these are the 2 most important controls of the delay. And with a dotted 8 delay and the way we want the sound to keep traveling on and repeating, we want a few things. We want the delay sound to be higher, to be almost as loud as the original guitar signal, and we want that trail to keep going on and on and on. The way to do that is to bring up the feedback. I'm going to bring this up to 45%, and the mix, I'm going to keep this at 48%. Turn on trail so that if your sound doesn't just cut off, you're going to let the delay repeats travel on. This is what it sounds like at 96 BPM. Now let's go to the last block available to us. Now we want a shimmer reverb. So let's go to the reverb tab. Let's bring in stereo. And you can see here that some of these things have begun to block out because there's just no more DSP. And lo and behold, we don't have enough DSP for the shimmer reverb. Now this happens for a few reasons. Number one, we have something upstream that is occupying a lot of DSP, that too much DSP, in fact, that it doesn't allow us to load a shimmer block. Now, if I want to do a shimmer block, I can do a few things. I can change something in the signal chain to be less DSP consuming. And I suspect that it's the delay, the adriatic delay is going to be the one that's causing us to have too little DSP. So let's change it to something a bit, something less DSP intensive. And I'm going to choose a ping pong delay. I'm going to turn this down. Scale at 75%. Again, don't need to worry too much about these parameters. I'm just going to change them up to something that you can hear. Yeah. I just wanted a basic ping pong from left to right. Still a bit much, so I'm going to bring it down. All right, that's cool. And we add in the dotted 8 delay. So all that is doing is adding a bit of movement from left to right to make the sound, stereo sound bigger and nicer. Let's try it again. Let's go back to reverb and stereo. Now we see that all have been unlocked because the ping pong delay occupies less DSP than the adriatic delay. So I'm going to load up the shimmer. Now, again, a lot of parameters here. Go back home and read up on what these parameters do. But I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to turn this pitch tool all the way down to octave down. So you're going to have the octave up as in 12 semitones and minus 12 semitones as the shimmer signal. And the only other thing I'm going to do is I want to change the decay. And a decay of 4 seconds means that the shimmer reverb signal only lasts for 4 seconds, which is quite short. This being a ubiquitous volume swell kind of sound, I'm going to bring that up all the way to, let's say, 17 seconds. Now, with all these enabled, this is what the sound sounds like. All the effect blocks have been taken up, and now it's time to put it into a control scheme that makes sense for you. I'm going to suggest a few things. I'm going to turn these things off. Now, if you look on your front panel of the HX Stomp, you're going to have two free buttons, FS1, FS2, and then if you've been following my setup, you have two more foot switches available to you, FS4, FS5, via the two-button aux switch. Now, you're going to have to ask yourself a very important question. What visual information do I personally need to make sense of this operating the patch? If you need to have information as to whether your overdrives are on or off, I suggest putting the overdrives onto FS1 and 2 because that's going to give you the direct visual response that whether the effect is on or off. FS4 and 5, because they are on an aux switch and they don't have lights, you are not going to be able to see whether the effect is on or off. Personally, I am of the opinion that if I have the overdrives on FS4 and 5, I can still see whether they are on or off based on the bypass state on the front panel of the HX Stomp. Now, that's a very big mouthful. Here's what I mean. When I turn the boost on, you can see that the front panel lights up. If I turn the overdrive on, you see that the front panel also lights up. If I have both on, I can see that both are on. If they're both off, you can see that both have been turned off. This is a visual cue that is persistent whether or not I'm on FS1, 2, or 3, 4. So I'm going to, 4, 5. FS3 is the tap tempo / tuner switch. So I'm going to keep it that way because I do want some visual information as to what tempo my BPM is set, and I do want to be able to tap in that BPM with tap tempo in case I need to change up the tempo between songs. So what you're going to do to assign these things is you're going to hover over the, let's say the EP booster. Now you're going to right click and bypass assign. Now you have a few switches. You have some options here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm going to suggest, and you can change this at your own as you will, to FS4. I'm going to go to my overdrive Tima, right click, bypass assign, and go to foot switch 5. Right now, I'll be able to change and toggle them based on FS4 and 5. Now I'm going to assign this, the .8 delay, to FS1. So right click, bypass assign, foot switch 1. So this will help me turn on and off the .8 delay. And I'm going to assign the shimmer to FS2. So right click on the block, bypass assign, FS2. So right now I can do this. I can hit both of these and get my swell sound. Forgive how weird it sounds because the pedal is quite precariously placed right next to my foot right now. So I'm having a little bit of difficulty getting it to be smoothly traveled from 0 to 100% position on the volume pedal. But anyway, so right now we have a complete control scheme. We've got the primary bass patch on clean tone. We can add in an overdrive, first stage. Add in the boost for lead. I can turn them both off, and then I can turn on the .8 delay. I can turn on overdrive as well. And then I can have a swell tone just by having the first two switches on. And there you have it, your very first preset build with the HX Stomp using the exact gear as was outlined in my previous video. If you've made it this far, congratulations, you should now have a fully functional Sunday-ready HX Stomp ready to rock at your next service. If you enjoy the sounds I've crafted so far, I have a free pack available for download where you can try my other HX Stomp presets and my HX Stomp Worship Essentials pack where I go overboard in maximizing the potential of the device for the Sunday service. Links are in the description box. This video is part of a new series where I'm catering to the serious beginner. My vision for these videos is that by the time you go through them, you'll have a working knowledge of what it takes to serve on a Sunday service, so navigate to the different videos in this playlist as you see fit, and most importantly, go and practice what's inside of them. Next up, I'll be getting you acquainted with your new electric guitar, where I'll share how each of these controls, from the pickup selector to the volume and tone knobs, help you create sonic textures without the need for extra gear. See you there. Until next time, I'm Justin, and I'm all about worship guitar. When you boot up the HX Stomp, enter global settings by pressing the two buttons simultaneously. Whoops. John, I'm trying to shoot here. John. Okay. That was Claire running out to feed me some food, and I am joined by you. How am I supposed to do any work with you around? Huh? Oops. Say something, John? Say something?